So this is our website. You can go to the markfawcettlab.com and explore what we have for you so far. But on the homepage, you can learn a little bit about our purpose, which I've also already described to you. And you can just jump right into exploring the atlas. And so this is our atlas here. This is all on ArcGIS Online Hub, which is important to know because we have to make certain decisions about, what coordinate reference system we use, for example, so that way it's compatible with ArcGIS Online. Right now, this is the most easily accessible platform to share the work that we are doing. We're always open to feedback and ideas for how to improve the user experience, though. So what you will see if you're exploring the atlas is all of the metropolitan areas that we have mapped so far. And joined to those shapefiles are the 1940 census microdata. And you can choose what you want to display. So currently the options you have available to you are racial groups, so broad racial groups, white, Black, Hispanic, and Asian. You can also break it down by nativity, US born, foreign born, and by education level. We have plans to add more data, but right now our primary goal is just to build out the atlas and add more areas. But if you ever want to know more, learn more, see more, you're always welcome to email us and we're happy to share. So other things that you will find on the website, you can full screen the atlas. You don't have to stay on that web page. So that's a much nicer experience for you. And relevant for today and what you decide to do after all this, we have our training page where you can access all of our resources. This is where you can come after these sessions are over to access the recordings, the slides from the presentations, and any other materials that we share that you need to get started. But most importantly for now, and this is something you might want to reference as we go along this week, is our best practices user guide. This user guide is everything from beginning to end you need to know to get your own historical mapping project started. And so we have explanations about the software you might want to use. You're not beholden to using QGIS, but it is open source. And so if you're looking for a low to no cost way to start a project, QGIS is an excellent option, and it's what we choose to use. And then we also have descriptions on the different terminology and resources and materials you're going to need to get started. And then as you go along to the end, you'll find, sorry, that's probably not fun for you to watch as me scrolling. You'll find step-by-step instructions on how to actually map in QGIS. So everything we're covering this week, you will find in here, plus much more. And so we have links to different guides that drill down into specific, sometimes esoteric issues you might encounter because you're working with historical materials. So feel free to look around in that guide. We follow along pretty closely with what's in there. All right, let me go back to my other screen here. Let's see. Brenda, are the slides back up?
Slides are back.
Excellent, thank you. The little green outline wasn't showing, so I didn't know. All right, so today here's what we're gonna do. We're going to go over what you need to know before getting started, and then we're going to talk about how to choose an area. Not all areas are feasible. You're really kind of at the mercy of whatever is available because this is relying on historical materials. And then we'll talk about how to get the project started, and specifically today talking about how to set up your workspace, because the having an organized workspace is really important for keeping track of all the different things you need to draw a precise map. So if you haven't had a chance already in the chat, just share why you're here. It was really interesting to look at the registration form and see that we have quite a diverse group in terms of where you're coming from. We have students, we have faculty, we have staff, we have community members. We have folks from all different areas and experiences and backgrounds. So we're really curious to just know why you decided to join us today. And if curiosity is the only answer you have, that's perfectly fine. We love curiosity. All right, so I'm going to get going on what to know before getting started. First, I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of doing this kind of work. So for students, Because so much of why we're doing this, where we're doing it here at Fresno State, we are a regional serving, minority serving institution. And we received the grant from the National Science Foundation largely in part because the program that funded us is focused on building research capacity at minority serving institutions. And so we've approached this entire project with that in mind. How do we support student learning and build research capacity among our students and faculty? And so the benefits to students for doing this kind of work, and when you're done with this, if you are a faculty member, you might consider building a course project out of this or some sort of student research experience out of this. Students build marketable skills in GIS. If you don't know what GIS is, that's okay, you will by the end. If you're in the social sciences, which many people are, I'm a social scientist, there aren't a lot of opportunities to get GIS experience and develop those skills in social science courses. And so this is a way to, introduce that into a course. And so any subject that you are teaching or researching that involves some sort of spatial pattern, even if you're not focusing on something historical, just having those skills that allows you to digitize a map and visualize data in some sort of spatial organization is going to be a benefit to you and to your students. There are no prerequisites or prior experience needed. So you don't have to have ever used GIS before. It is perfectly fine. All of us here, I'm self-taught in GIS. I never took a formal course. And that goes for some of the students we've worked with too. They learned through doing this project. The course output can be used for their own research. So they come out with this very tangible product that they can then join any data that they have too. And so it's something that they can keep. And so it's not just, a learning experience, and also something material comes out of it that they can use afterwards. And then finally, gaining that experience in GIS helps students understand the power of visual storytelling. So how useful it is to visualize those spatial patterns. It helps you understand something about your community that maybe you didn't before. I'm going to pause here and just let Brenda, and I'm not going to call on Patricia because I know she's not available to speak, but Brenda, is there anything else you want to chime in and add?
I do, just real quick. I am a first generation student. I'm finishing up my bachelor in anthropology and city planning. And this summer I am a McNair student as well, and I'm working on an undergraduate thesis titled Cartographies of Rural Futures Agency in Unincorporated San Joaquin Valley. So as a student from an unincorporated community, I'm really interested in issues of space and how to display them visually, how to take spreadsheets and historical data to display them, to speak to current issues. And this project has been really teaching me the know-how on how to do that, where to find things, what are they called, and navigate those structures to pull data that I need. So I have my undergraduate thesis, but also a map that also can incorporate that as well as oral histories and really visualize what I'm writing about, which I think is really valuable both for in an academic context, but also for entry points to share this research back to the communities that I'm a part of who might not have the time to read a 30-page undergraduate thesis.
Thanks, Brenda. Mary, do you have anything? I didn't warn you that I was going to do this, but is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I came in to this project never having worked with GIS before, right? Like a lot of students do, and really got my exposure to it that way. I ended up getting a GIS certificate, which exposed me to a lot of the like more formal settings of GIS curriculum. And I can't say enough how unique this application is, right? If you are an undergraduate or a graduate student, if you want to be exposed to GIS material or learn that software, you have to take courses in the geosciences and civil engineering. And those courses aren't approachable or applicable to students in the social sciences very often. So this is a really unique opportunity for students to build skills that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, and extremely marketable. I'm on the job market now, and I can't tell you how many roles are emphasizing GIS capabilities for applicants. So it's a great advantage for students to have.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. As we go along, because in the interest of time, I'm not going to be answering questions out loud because we just want to keep moving, but you're always welcome to ask questions in the chat, and Mary or Brenda will reply. All right. So there we go. From the instructor experience, if you're thinking about how to use these skills and tools in a course experience or student research experience, a lot of the same points apply. There's no prior experience needed. When I hire students onto this project, I don't make it a requirement that they had to have used GIS before, because part of the fun of it is like teaching someone to use GIS who's never used it before. So no prior experience needed, no proprietary software or subscriptions. QGIS is free. If you went through the trouble of downloading it, you probably got hit with that "please donate to us" page. Definitely support QGIS if you are willing, because they are very cool. But you don't have to pay for it. It's open source. Student work cannot be automated using AI. And so if that is something that you're just trying to find ways to navigate that, as I am, this is a project that would be very difficult for a student to accomplish with the use of AI. You can't just ask ChatGPT to do this for you. And then the course output can be mutually beneficial. So the students get something out of it, but then you do too if it's part of a larger project that you're working on. All right, and then the benefit to everyone is that if you want to work with us, and by that I mean you decide to map a 1940 metropolitan district and you finish it, and you're following our steps you're following our guidelines every step of the way, you are welcome to then send that to us. We will double check it, triple check it, and then we'll add it to the atlas with credit to you as the creator of that particular shapefile. And so one thing that we really like to highlight about our project is that there is a crowdsourcing element to it. We are welcoming, inviting other folks to contribute to the atlas. So if your students are working on a metropolitan area in 1940 and they finish it and the team wants to add it to the atlas, you can send it our way. We'll check it, we'll validate it, and we'll include it. And then we will make sure that those students have credit. I'm actually going to switch screens so you can see what I mean here. For creating that particular shapefile. So on the Mark Fawcett website, if you go to our data page, you will see that every single metropolitan area or district that has been mapped so far names who prepared that shapefile. And then those shapefiles are also available to anyone who visits our site. You'll go to this public access folder and you can download the shapefiles and the census data that goes with that shapefile for anything you want to do. So everything we do is meant to be publicly accessible. So that's one benefit. And then we also, if you're thinking about more like the broader community impact, building out this atlas opens more doorways to community history that maybe folks didn't have before. There was a lot of interest in the 1940 census when it entered the public domain. People who were really big on genealogy or tracking down where their families lived or trying to understand their neighborhoods in historical times. This is one more tool that we're sharing with the public that supports those goals. You can share your new skills with others. Once you know how to do it, you can teach someone else how to do it. And so we're hoping that it spreads that way, because you will, once you get past this little learning curve, you get pretty handy at using GIS software. And then it's also fun. It may not seem fun at first, but I promise everyone who has done this has at some point realized that they're actually having a really good time. It is satisfying. It is at times frustrating, but then solving the problem that you encounter is even more satisfying. And in the end, you get this beautiful map. And then you can see that data light up on the map, and it's actually quite fun to see it play out. So we hope you get bit by the mapping bug. All right, and then finally, the benefits to community leaders. So for folks here who are representing community organizations, or you are just a curious resident who wants to build more skills or pursue some personal project, again, this is about supporting and enhancing public knowledge. It's about community learning and skill development. And you have more tools at your disposal for documenting and sharing community stories. And so if you're doing any kind of work like that, please let us know, because we love to hear that there are other applications that are beyond academic. We really want that to be the case. All right, let's jump into a little bit of definition. So I make no assumptions about how much familiarity you have with census geography or how the Census Bureau defines geographical boundaries. So this is a nice graphic that shows you how census geographies are nested. And when we say nested, what we mean is that within a larger geographic area, that smaller geographic area will nest within it. It will not cross the boundary of the larger area that it is in. And so that's a nice, clean way to drill down from larger to smaller geographies that the Census Bureau often uses, not always. That's not always the case. But these are nested areas that are relevant for mapping historical census geography. The largest area that we are interested in is the Metropolitan District. And then the smallest area for this project is the Enumeration District. We don't go down to blocks because not every metropolitan area had blocks in 1940. And so the Enumeration District in 1940 is the most consistent neighborhood level geography that you can count on in that decade. Okay, we'll come back to that graphic, but let's talk about metropolitan districts. So in 1940, metropolitan districts were anchored by one or more central cities. And so if you were looking at, for example, I'm here in Fresno, California, the metropolitan district for Fresno in Fresno County was the city of Fresno. And so you would find a metropolitan district for the city of Fresno. Any metropolitan area you can think of today, that big city that everyone thinks of as like, that's like the core, it was probably the metropolitan district in 1940. These are cities of 50,000 persons or more. They are contiguous minor civil divisions, and we use 1940 metropolitan districts to decide what we're going to map, because those were the urban centers in 1940, but we actually rely on 1950 standard metropolitan areas, and there's a really important reason why. Starting in 1950, and this continues to be the practice today, the Census Bureau defines metropolitan areas using county boundaries. County boundaries are nice and stable and consistent for the most part. They do not change very often. And so that's really, really beneficial if you're trying to observe patterns over time, doing any kind of longitudinal work, or even just comparing multiple decades. Using those county boundaries is extremely convenient. And so we map metropolitan districts, but we actually map the counties around those metropolitan districts in alignment with the 1950 standard metropolitan area definitions. And the link that you see here, which I believe Brenda's going to drop in the chat, takes you to the 1950 population census. And what's beneficial about that document is that you can look under any of these names that we use to refer to an area and see what geographic areas fall underneath that. So for example, if you're interested in Hartford, Connecticut, you can see here that these are all the areas that would be part of Hartford, Connecticut, the standard metropolitan area. So why do we look at enumeration districts as our neighborhood level geography? There are a number of reasons. One is that they were universal. So the entire United States had enumeration districts. And so you can count on finding them in any of the metropolitan areas that you choose to map. They are roughly comparable to contemporary block groups. If you're not familiar with contemporary census geography, you're looking at areas with populations between, it could be as low as 700 up to about 2,500, depending on if you're in an urban or more rural part of the metro area. They typically align with administrative, natural, or built boundaries. In urban centers, you'll find that enumeration districts follow street boundaries in pretty logical ways. Outside of urban centers, they might follow township boundaries, they might follow rivers or railroads. And so it makes it really easy I shouldn't say really easy, but it makes it easier to map that boundary because you have these visible landmarks that in many cases are still there to follow as you're drawing the boundary. They were designed to be walkable because these were the enumeration districts that the enumerators would work within as they were conducting the census. And so they're often manageable geographic areas that are designed to what's the word I'm looking for? Mimic is not the word. Emulate neighborhoods. Emulate neighborhoods. And they have unique identifiers that are nested within higher geographies. And so every enumeration district has its own numeric identifier that will nest within a higher geography. And so within Harris County, we're going to be talking about Houston today. You're only going to find one enumeration district with this particular number, this prefix, and this ED number. And so that makes it so that you don't get areas mixed up. All right, some of the resources that you're going to want to rely heavily on as you're doing this work. First and foremost, Steve Morse. Steve Morse is our friend. If you're unfamiliar with stevemorse.org, it is I think it is the most used site for anyone doing this kind of work. Stevemorse.org, we're gonna travel over there. Let's see. stevemorse.org is a one-stop shop for all sorts of historical genealogical work. So even if like you decide, I don't actually want to do any of this, you might find other things on stevemorse.org that interest you. There are, I honestly haven't even been through everything that is on the site. But you will find manifests from Ellis Island, from other areas. There's even stuff for the Canada, the UK census on here. But the part that we're interested in is everything that they provide on the US Census. And so on stevemorse.org, you will find two crucial pieces of information that you need to get started. One are an organized, accessible way to access the microfilm images of the maps of the enumeration districts. So every jurisdiction submitted these, hand-drawn maps showing their enumeration districts. Those exist in the National Archives. They have, for the most part, been scanned. And you could just go directly to NARA, but Steve Morse makes it easier to just find what you need. And by that, what I mean is, I'm just gonna head here. If you want to find, just because I'm here, I'm gonna say the maps for Fresno County. You can go, like I said, you can go directly to NARA, but what stevemorse.org does so conveniently is give you links to exactly where you want to go looking within whatever county or city you asked for. So if I want the maps for City of Fresno, it takes me to NARA, but it takes me right to the maps for the City of Fresno. So that is a really convenient, wonderful resource. Another thing that you will get out of stevemorse.org, I'm going to travel back here, are the descriptions of the enumeration districts. So I'll go directly to the microfilm. And there's easier ways to get around. I'm just being quick right now. So through the Steve Morse website, you can also go to the written descriptions of the enumeration district boundaries. There's a reason why you're going to want both the maps and the written descriptions. Sometimes one fails you and the other has to step in. And so it's important to have both. All right, we'll come back to Steve Morse. I do encourage you to dig around though. There are other tools on stevemorse.org that are going to come up today. One is this tool that is provided on the site that will grab all those map scans for you. You just have to follow a few steps and then it'll let you download all the images at the same time. And so that saves you the trouble of having to go one image at a time to download it and save it into your workspace. And like I said, this link is also available to you. You can also just go directly to NARA. And so you don't have to use stevemorse.org if you don't want to. In terms of software, as I mentioned already, and as you got in the registration email, QGIS is our preferred software, primarily because it is open source. It is, we really emphasize using no-cost materials as much as possible. The atlas that you saw on our website is through ArcGIS Online. You do not have to use ArcGIS. In fact, we encourage you to use the open source software. So that way, if you're working with students or community members, there's no financial burden on them when it comes to accessing software. We recommend using the long-term release. There are always new versions of QGIS. You take some risks when you get the newest version. There are more bugs, there are more issues that they are working through as they go. The long-term release is meant to be more stable. It's where there's less experimental stuff going on with the software. And so we recommend using the long-term release. You also will want a good PDF software. Foxit is free, it's open source. Think of it as like Adobe, just you don't have to pay for it. And it allows you to, if you like using PDF viewers and editors to work with materials, Foxit is a good open source option as well. Okay, so let's go into the next part here. How do you choose a metropolitan area? Because here's what might happen. You might decide, I want to map the community that I live in. Now, I am from a small town in Texas that is technically part of the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. But here's what happened when I tried to go look for that particular community, thinking like, I'm going to map this and then share it with my family and it'll be really neat. The maps for that community were basically unusable. And so choosing a metropolitan area will not always pan out favorably for you, but we're going to give you some guidelines to decide if ultimately this is a feasible project or not. So some things to consider before you get started, or if you're encouraging students or colleagues or family members to decide how do I start? There's so many metropolitan areas in the United States. You might have a personal interest, your hometown, the university, the location, if you're at a university where your school is, or there might be some historical significance, some socio-historical significance of the area that you are mapping. There's some particular event or shift or snapshot in time that's important to you that you want to map. If you do any sort of, for example, natural disaster work and you want to understand what happened to a community before or after, or what were the conditions of that community before something occurred, that might be a reason to choose an area. And then if anything has changed, let's say you are observing metropolitan areas in the upper Midwest and the Northeast during the period of the Great Migration, when Black Americans were traveling from the South or migrating from the South up into the upper Midwest and Northeast. 1940 would be a good time to check in on those metropolitan areas and see what did they look like in 1940 as this demographic shift was occurring. So there are any number of reasons. Maybe it's just curiosity. Curiosity is always a great reason to do something. Once you have identified a place to start, then feasibility must be considered. And the thing with historical mapping is that you can't just sort of like ignore the feasibility aspect. It will stop you cold. Like you won't be able to go any further if you don't have a feasible project. And that is because you are relying on these historical materials, which may or may not be available, may or may not be in a usable enough quality. So first you have to consider if the microfilm of the manuscript descriptions, so those written descriptions, is available. An easy way to check is to go through the Steve Morse website. It's easier to navigate, to specify what exactly it is you're looking for, and just check, make sure that the materials are there. In many cases they are, but sometimes they're not. And you might be able to work around that. It depends on if the scans of the maps are available and usable. The other thing you want to consider is the scope. So if you are, for example, thinking about a course project, I wouldn't encourage you to, for example, put your students on New York City. right? It takes a long time to get through these enumeration districts. Mary, how many enumeration districts does Houston have?
It
Like roughly
has like the entire metro area has about maybe 270.
270?
Mm-hmm.
So a city like that might be feasible if you have a team of students working on it during a semester. Other cities like Los Angeles, Brenda, how many are we dealing with in LA?
It's like over 1,000, like
Over 1,000. That would not be a great course project for students. That would take much longer. And especially in areas that are more sprawled, you have less urban dense areas of the metropolitan district. That might be more difficult, more time consuming because you're going to encounter more spaces where the boundaries are harder to define, harder to see. So you want to consider the scope in terms of feasibility. Is this something that we can accomplish within this time frame? Is this something that my team can handle without too much difficulty? And then finally, and this is probably one of the more fatal problems, is the quality of the maps. And so if the maps are not easy to view, the scans are not always good, you may have to stop. The other option would be to travel to Washington, D.C. and scan the maps yourself. You could do that if you have the resources and the time. That's always an option. But for many of us, that's not an option. And so you are just beholden to whatever is available through NARA currently on their in their database. So let's talk about map quality. This is an example of what a good map would look like. All right, and at first you may not be super clear on what it is you're looking at here. This is a neighborhood in Houston, Texas, and here's some of the features that make this a good map. One is that the scan is pretty clear. And by that, what we mean is you can clearly see those block boundaries. This is just an image on a PowerPoint slide, but if we were to have this full image blown up on our screen in high definition, you would be able to read those block numbers. And the block numbers are important when you're using the descriptions because they will often say what blocks are within this enumeration district. And you can see the street names, which is important because enumeration districts in urban areas like this are often defined by the streets. So this is good. You have very dark pencil lines. You have legible numbers, and legible is a relative term. So what you see here, these pencil numbers, you see 15, 17, 22, 23. Those are the enumeration district numbers. You want to be able to see those. And you still have to look hard, right? And it would help to have software where you can zoom in really close, like a PDF viewer or a really good image viewer. But this is as good as it gets. This is good. You also want identifiable geographies. And so you want to be able to tell where you are. The thing about the map scans is that you don't get the entire map of the metropolitan district in one image. It's broken out into sections. And so this might be all you get for this image. And so you want to be able to know where in Houston am I right now? And this is nice because it's labeled. This is Houston Heights. This is the neighborhood of Houston Heights in Houston, Texas. So this is what you're going to be looking for when you're deciding as you're browsing through NARA and deciding, is this a feasible area? You want maps to look like this. And to make that abundantly clear, let's take a look at what a bad map looks like. So this is Austin, Texas. I don't know if I have any UT Austin folks here on the call, but this is right around the University of Texas. And we have all sorts of issues here. This isn't fatal necessarily. It's not necessarily fatal, but it's not great. So obviously it's blurry, right? It makes it much harder to see and work with. The pencil lines are very faint. Let me go back here and just point something else out that I failed to mention. The enumeration district boundaries are drawn in pencil. And so you see that pencil line going down right here and going down 11th Street. You want to be able to see those because those are the enumeration district boundaries. That's what they were doing there. In Austin, you really can't see them. I can sort of, I think, faintly see one right there, maybe. But I really can't. It's quite difficult to tell what's going on here. I can see block numbers, and so that's helpful. If I have a description of an enumeration district that says blocks 14, 13, 12, 11, 10 are in this ED, I could maybe work with that. But I can't rely on this map scan alone. And we have unidentifiable geography. We also have this crease going through it, right? And so if this is maybe just one part of the map, you might be able to work around it, or you might be able to find other resources to deal with the problem. If the entire area is like that, you should probably move on, unless you're willing to take on the challenge. But if you are working with folks who are just learning how to do this for the first time, this might not be the best entry project for doing that kind of work. We actually do have Austin mapped, thanks to folks on our team who were willing to take on this challenge. But you want to watch out for these kinds of issues. In the training guide, let me switch back over. There we go. If you're looking at our best practices guide, one thing you will find a link to towards the beginning on page 3 is our guide to the 1940 enumeration district maps. This guide walks you through in more detail some of the challenges you'll encounter and some of the things you should be aware of and the things that you should know. It also includes links to all the resources that you'll want to rely on. And so we have way more on these particular issues to help you assess if these maps are usable or not, and what to do if you encounter particular challenges that we have encountered. All right. Back on the screen. So I'm curious right now, has anyone, as I've been talking, looked up an area and just glanced at the maps? I'm just curious to know if you have found anything. It's okay if you haven't. Omaha is good in some places, but not in others. Okay, Duluth looks pretty good. Good. Yeah, so from metro area to metro area, it's going to vary because these maps were submitted by jurisdictions and they're all in different quality. There have been times where I've come across just an excellent map and I wanted to go find those people and been like, thank you. I want to travel back in time and thank them for their beautifully drawn map. Other times, yeah, it's going to vary from place to place. So, okay, good. I'm glad that y'all are looking around. Oh, US Virgin Islands. I'm actually not sure. That makes me wonder if we have the census data to go with territories. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna pocket that away. All right, so how do we get started? Right? The first step, of course, is identifying, yes, of course I will. The first step, of course, is identifying where you're going to work, what area you're going to work on. The next step, whoops, is identifying the key geographic information you need so that you can start drawing. There is a lot of setup and it's going to pay off once you get started. It really does pay off. Because when you're talking about drawing 1,000 to 2,000 enumeration districts, even a couple hundred, you want to have that organized workspace first. So one of our resources that we offer to you, and you can find this in the best practices guide as well, is our library of templates. And so I am going to travel there now. And Brenda is going to drop the link in the chat. Probably already has because Brenda is on top of it. So this template, and this is something that you can make a copy of, allows you to go ahead and start organizing your workspace. And so on the first tab of this template is where you're going to identify that key geographical information. And I'm going to walk through each piece at a time. But up here, you'll see there's an example using LA. And just real quickly, before I go step by step through this, you'll see that we name the central city, which defines the metropolitan district. You're also going to want to know what the 1950 metropolitan area is. It's usually the same name. And so you're not going to find anything different there. You're going to want to know what counties make up that metropolitan area in 1950. So the LA metropolitan area is Los Angeles County and Orange County. And then this is really, really important as you get into drawing your enumeration districts. You're going to want to know what areas are defined within that metropolitan district, because each area has its own prefix. There's the enumeration district number, and before that number is the prefix that tells you this is the area that ED exists in. And so, for example, in LA, you have LA County, but that's not all of LA County, because Long Beach City, Los Angeles City have their own prefixes for those central cities within LA County. And then Orange County has its own prefix. And so these are things that you're going to want to document at the very start. Other things that might be helpful to do, and I'll talk about more of this as we go along, but you're going to want to look up those microfilm descriptions from Steve Morse and drop the hyperlinks here by prefix. So LA County prefix 19, you're going to want to put 19 here and then include the hyperlink to where those microfilm descriptions are for the EDs with the prefix 19, the enumeration districts for LA County. It makes it easier later when you're in your work to go find those pages, right? You can just click on the link. Here's the description for the enumeration districts in LA County. So we have a lot here. You don't have to use all of it. If you're more of a just like jump in and make a mess of it kind of person, that's your style. But if you like to be highly organized, we let you escalate it up to that level too. Okay. So that is a resource that you can and should rely on. And all you have to do is make a copy of that to make it your own. And now let's talk a little bit more about those relevant area identifiers that you need, the geographic information you need to get started and make yourself aware of all of the different areas in the metropolitan area. It's a lot of use of the word area that you will need to cover and what their identifiers are. So using Houston, Texas as an example, Houston's a nice, simple example because when you go to the 1940 Census of Population, and we have a link directly to that, you can see that the metropolitan district included the city of Houston, which is this urban core, and then everything outside of the city of Houston. So that tells you that the metropolitan district of Houston was split up into two areas, the urban core and then the surrounding area. You're also going to want to know the district code. This may not be important to you right away, but it will be important later. Once the shapefile is done, we will join the census microdata to that shapefile. In order to do that, we need the IPUMS code for that metropolitan district. So Houston's IPUMS code, and we have the link directly to the codes, is 3360. You're going to want to go ahead and document that number because we'll need that later to join that data with the shapefile. Okay, small point there, but it's just important to document it. So you'll see we're now here. We know the metropolitan district's name is Houston, Texas, and its code is 3360. The metropolitan area in 1950 is also Houston. Like I said, usually the names are the same. You can find out what counties make up the metropolitan area. Remember, metropolitan areas are defined by county boundaries. That's why we use them, because county boundaries are very stable over time. You can recreate a 1950 metropolitan area in 2020 using those counties. And so it's very convenient. You can go to the 1950 Census of Population. This is also a link that you will find in our materials. And what's nice about this document is it will tell you what counties you're going to find in that metropolitan area. Houston's nice. There's only one county. It's Harris County. And so you know that you're going to be mapping every enumeration district in Harris County in order to recreate that metropolitan area. One other thing you're going to want to know, you may or may not be familiar with this, but every county has a FIPS code. It's a unique code that goes with that county. it has to start, the county FIPS code by itself is not unique, but when it's combined with the state FIPS code, then it does become unique. So the state of Texas FIPS code is 48, and then each county within Texas has its county code, which is, 1 to 3 digits. If it's 1 digit, you would have leading zeros. So Harris County is 201. And so the unique FIPS code for Harris County is 48, which is the code for Texas, and then 201, which is the code for Harris County. You're also going to need that information. Okay, so if we're going back to our little table here that we're filling out, we can say Houston is made up of Harris County, and that's its FIPS code, 48201. And then finally, you're going to want to know what prefixes you will find. Recall when we were looking at this, the 1940 census of population, the metropolitan district is divided into 2 areas, the city of Houston and everything around the city of Houston. Each of those is going to have its own prefix. And so you need to know what those prefixes are. Okay, so we typically have, my light just turned off. There we go. We typically have a prefix for the central cities and another prefix for the areas around the central city. Okay, so this is just a larger image of what we were looking at that shows you how Houston is broken out. How do we know what the prefixes are? If you jump ahead, so we're getting ready to add the prefixes. There's a city of Houston, and then there's Harris County. Everything that's Harris County, that's not the city of Houston. Okay, so we've got Houston, Texas is our metropolitan district. Harris County is the county within that district. Houston City is a city within that county. One way you can find the prefixes, and this is, I think, probably the easiest way to do it, is to rely on Steve Morse. And so if you go to the Steve Morse Unified ED Finder, you'll find this link everywhere in our guide and also in these slides and also in the chat. Make sure you specify 1940. This is a constant point of frustration with us on the TOC. Mary nodding her head. We do this all the time. It defaults to 1950, and we forget, I think, on a daily basis to switch it back to 1940. So make sure you switch it to 1940, or you will be very confused with what you find. And then just tell it you want Texas, Harris County, leave city blank, because you want to know about everything in Harris County. You don't want a specific city. And what you will get when you do that are the links to the maps. But right now, you don't necessarily want the maps. What you want to pay attention to are the prefixes. The prefix is the set of numbers before the hyphen. And what you'll notice is Harris County as a whole goes from Enumeration District 101-1 to 258-297. There's 2 different prefixes that we know of. And if you look at the next few links, here's what you'll notice. The link for City of Houston specifically has those prefixes 258. So that tells you that for City of Houston, the prefix is 258. And everything that's not City of Houston, so these enumeration districts, their prefix is 101. This is the information we need to proceed. There are other ways you can find this information, but this is probably the quick and easiest way to do it. So now going back to this table we're filling out, we know that the City of Houston's prefix is 258. And everything else in Harris County that's not the City of Houston has a prefix of 101. Here's why this is important. You're going to find an enumeration district with the number 10. There is an enumeration district 258-10 and an enumeration district 101-10. You need that prefix so that you know if you're in the central city of Houston or if you're in the area outside of the central city of Houston. You don't want to get those 2 things mixed up because those are different places. So make sure you have your prefixes documented. Every metropolitan district is going to have its set of prefixes. Sometimes it'll just be 1, but sometimes if there's a major central city and then a lot of surrounding area, it'll be more than 1. And just to show you how complicated this can get, here's Minneapolis-St. Paul, which I just had a lot of fun doing. This was the last one I just finished. Minneapolis-St. Paul has a lot going on. So first of all, there are 2 central cities, right? As we know, it's why they call it the Twin Cities. And there are also surrounding rural counties that make up that metropolitan area, according to the 1950 definition. So here's how that ends up shaking out. All right, so the counties that make up the 1950 SMA of Minneapolis-St. Paul are Anoka, Dakota, Hennepin, and Ramsey. All 4 of those need to be accounted for. So you'll see their FIPS codes here. 27 is the state code for Minnesota. And then those 3 trailing digits are the codes for the counties. So Anoka is 3, Dakota is 37, Hennepin is 53, Ramsey is 123. But I need to drill down even further and get the prefixes. And so I'm gonna focus on Ramsey County here. If you look at these last 2 rows, St. Paul is located in Ramsey County. St. Paul, the city, has its own prefix of 90. The actual urban city of St. Paul prefix is 90. Ramsey County has a prefix of 62. The EDs that you'll find with the prefix 62 are all the ones in Ramsey County that are not in St. Paul. So you need to account for all of them. If a central city has its own prefix, you need to be aware of that. Minneapolis has its own prefix of 89. Hennepin, where Minneapolis is located, the county has a prefix of 27. So this setup is really important so that you don't get confused later. Make sure you have documented every area that makes up that metropolitan district. And you're aware of all the counties that are in the metropolitan area. All right. So where are we at on time? All right. So with these last, I'm going to spend 10 more minutes going over this, and then we'll open it up for a little Q&A at the end if you want to just follow up on something. It's not a lot of time, but that's okay because we are going to give you more time further down the road to dive into whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But the main thing you want to do before starting your project is you want to gather the map scans, and you also want to get those written descriptions of the enumeration districts. Those are the 2 key pieces of information you need to know where to draw your lines in QGIS. So starting with the map scans, using the Steve Morse website, you can follow the steps to head to exactly where you want to go in NARA, the National Archives, and see those images, right? And from there, you can just click on each image at a time, download it if you just like to kill time doing things like that. But Steve Morse also has a tool that lets you just batch download all the images at once. And so it's up to you which way you want to do it. If you want to use the tool that lets you download all the maps at the same time, you are going to have to do it by area. You can't just say, I want all the maps for the Houston Metropolitan District, because it's broken out, if you recall, into sort of separate collections here. And so you'll have to do it one collection at a time. But once you have followed the Steve Morse steps to access the maps that you need, what you're going to want to do is click on the first map so that it blows up big and you get the actual URL for that map where it is stored on the servers. Okay, so you'll see this on the NARA website. You'll click on that image or you can click on download, actually. Click on download. It will open up the map on a new page and you'll get this URL. Okay, from here, you could just right click and save and just do one image at a time that way. You can do that if you want. But if you want to use the tool, then once you have that URL for the first page, you plug it in here and then tell it how many more images it needs to grab. And so there are 12 images. So you say start here and I want 12 images. And then you'll say get images to download all the images at the same time. Okay, once it loads that up for you, you're going to say save page as and save it in your work folder. This is a good chance actually to just show you what a work folder can look like. You're going to want a work folder where you keep everything organized, which by the way is a really great exercise for your students. If they are not familiar or trained or comfortable with file management, This is a really great skill that they develop. Gone are the days where where people grow up managing folders on their computers. That is increasingly no longer a skill we see our students coming in with. And so this is a great way to just kind of remind them that computers are organized in this way. And there's a way to organize your information that's not a cloud stream. So one way you could organize your folder is by admin is where you would keep the template with all your information. Maps is where you would keep your images. And then Shape 1940 is where the actual QGIS project would be located. So in your maps folder, you can save that page. And it will contain all of the maps for, in this case, this particular collection. And then you would do that as many times as you needed. So 2, 3, 4. That's a way to save some time. If you want to just go one image at a time and just download them individually, you can do that too. Let's say it's only like 2 images. You don't have to go through all this. But if it's, let's say, 80 images, this might be a way to make your life a little easier. Okay, some steps you might want to do if you plan on using a PDF viewer, you're going to want to convert those JPEGs. They'll be downloaded as JPEGs into PDFs. If you're working with a team, you're going to want to add them to a shared drive folder or whatever it is you're using to work together. And then again, you could just individually download the images from NARA if you need to or want to. And then finally, setting up your workspace. Things to consider is the content that you are including. So you're going to want some sort of documentation of your process. Our workbook of templates is a great way to do that. If you poked around that template, you probably saw the tabs for keeping track of the status of the enumeration districts, for documenting what's contained in each map. And also for just kind of logging your daily work, there's a tab there that lets you just copy that section over and over as many times as you need to say, this is what I did today. Here's what I'm going to do next time. For students, that's a great way to get them in the practice of documenting their work process. You're going to want to make sure you have consistent naming, organization, using the template. You're going to want external consistency across projects. So make sure if you have a team, they're all using the same naming conventions and folder structures. And then you also want internal consistency. So make sure everyone's using the same software. Everyone's using the same file formats, those kinds of things. All right, I already talked about this, so I'm going to keep going. So here's a lovely example from Mary of what your worksheet can look like where you're keeping track of everything. So this is a beautiful page that shows what prefixes are included, some basic geographic identifying information, and then you can make it look however you want it to look. Just make sure that that key information is there so that you're not constantly tracking down or losing track of those key pieces of information. Okay, something else, this is what I mentioned earlier. If you want to keep track of which image contains what, in an area like Houston, where you've got a lot of map scans, it might be beneficial to take note of the number of the map. You'll see it in the URL in the file name. And make note that map 136 has these enumeration districts in it. So that way, when you're looking through your collection of images, I need to work on Goose Creek today. Map 136 has Goose Creek in it. So that's a lot of work up front, but it pays off later when you're working with a big area. And then finally, you're going to want those descriptions, like I mentioned. So the population schedules are also helpful. You have links to those. But here's something you can do so that you are not constantly going back into the Steve Moore site to find the written descriptions. I'm going to switch over here. Okay, so one thing you can do, I'm just going to, here's Minneapolis. I got here, I'm actually going to take several steps back so you can see exactly how I got there. If I want the descriptions for Minneapolis, I'm going to go to ED descriptions transcribed, not microfilm, transcribed. And I'm going to tell it I want Minnesota. And you're going to have to break it out by county, but that's okay. Let's just start with Hennepin. And I'm going to just say all EDs. I want all of them. Say search. It will bring up this. This is a digitized version of the enumeration districts. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight all of this. And I'm going to copy it. And then in my workbook, and I'm going to mess with the template for just a second, but just bear with me. In my workbook, I'm going to go to the tab that says ED descriptions, and I'm going to paste those right here. It pastes very cleanly into a spreadsheet. And what's nice is that, let's say I'm working on enumeration district 27-8. I can click on, I just did it. I forgot to change it to 1940. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to switch this to 1940 and try again. Every time. All right, here's 1940. So let's just retrace those steps. Highlight all of this. Here, I'm going to clear that out. All right. So every enumeration district that I'm going to find in Hennepin County is now here. And I could even add another column here. I could say status. So that way, as I'm working through these enumeration districts, I can say, you know, yes, if done, or something like that. You can add whatever you need. But what's nice about having this here is that if I'm, say, working on enumeration district 27-6, if you click on view, it will take you directly to the microfilm. And so that's a really nice way to not have to keep going back to the Steve Moore site, risk accidentally leaving it at 1950 and then having to retrace your steps over again. And, you know, not having to scroll through image after image after image, trying to find where you need to go, right? You've got it here in your workbook. You can just click and go right to the description. We do recommend looking at the actual microfilm when you're working, just because you're going to get more information here. And it's a little, the way that they organize the information has a logic to it that gets lost with this. So you want to go to the microfilm when you're actually working. We have other resources that you might want to be aware of. So if you're looking at the guide, down here on page 4, there's a link, and this is a living document. We add things as we go. So if you find anything that's useful or cool, or you found it for one particular area, let's say like your public library just has this amazing database, please let us know, because what we're doing is we're adding things that have been helpful for us as we've worked. And so you'll find just some tips on where else you can go. If the enumeration district maps are failing you, if the descriptions are referencing a railroad that no longer exists, a river that's no longer there, a neighborhood that was destroyed by interstate construction, which happens a lot in some of the neighborhoods that I in particular am trying to study, you might need to drill down to a more local level and look for those archives that maybe documented what that neighborhood used to look like. So that's the part where I think it's a little more you're on your own, and you have to do a little bit more problem solving and detective work. And what I have heard from the students who have worked on this project is that they actually have a lot of fun doing that part, just tracking down that information, finding the clues, just to draw this one enumeration district boundary as accurately as possible. And so we're documenting things that have been helpful for us. So for example, Mary was working on Pittsburgh, and here are some of the resources that were really helpful for mapping Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. So please share anything you have with us. We are happy to add it to our list.